The Saltmarsh Vigil, 3rd Meadow, Summer 825, Western Kingdom. Location: Seagate port and river-walled city of the Duchy of Karsala. The air over New Seagate, even this far from the briny docks, felt heavy, a cloying mix of coastal humidity and the metallic tang of suppressed panic. It was late afternoon in Meadow Month, the height of the summer growing season, yet the usual vibrant energy of the port city seemed dampened, pressed down by the mystery emanating from the mirewood fringe. Beric Harpswell, the meticulous craftsman whose hands usually understood the precise stress points of tempered steel, found his focus fractured. He sat in the shadowed common room of the Gilded Cog Asterisk, a small establishment favored by artisans needing respite from the wealthy districts, nervously polishing the brass fittings of a lantern he'd already perfected weeks ago. His quiet demeanor, usually a sign of deep contemplation regarding his next masterpiece, now betrayed a tense readiness. He had been approached not by a wealthy patron, but by old man Tiberius, whose desperation cut through the city's usual avarice. 4 children gone, swallowed by the sickly yellow cypress swamp that bordered the city's forgotten edge. Beric felt a craftsman's disdain for the sloppy, inexact nature of the loss. Things didn't just cease to be, they were taken, and a craftsman was needed to trace the flaw in the mechanism of their vanishing. Beside him sat Anya Meadowsweet, her apron still bearing faint, flowery smudges from the morning bake, though she hadn't been near a hearth in hours. Her gentle eyes, typically reflecting the warmth of well-proofed bread, were clouded with worry for the absent little ones. She wasn't a fighter, nor an adventurer, but her deep roots in the lower districts and her innate kindness made her essential. Children knew Anya. She clutched a small, knotted piece of twine, a prayer offered by Tiberius. Nearby, the more worldly Sarah Meadowlake, sharp-witted even in repose, consulted a small, leather-bound book filled with notes on local flora, searching for any swamp-borne blight or contagion that might explain the disappearances other than outright malice. Sarah, the journeyman herbalist, understood poisons and humors better than most physicians. She murmured softly, "The sap of those coastal cypress, Beric, it's known to cause deep lethargy if inhaled. But kidnapping requires intent, not mere sickness." Lyra Meadowlight, the wood elf mage, materialized seemingly from the shadows with the quiet grace of falling moss. Her presence brought a subtle, clean scent of pine and ozone, a startling contrast to the dock odors. Lyra, with her master herbalist skill, sensed the deeper wrongness. The mirewood is not merely sick, Sarah. It is attuned. Something is vibrating beneath the silt, pulling the focus of the small ones. The shadows Finian spoke of are not just lack of light, they are barriers thinning. Their small group, an odd blend of meticulous craft, humble compassion, pragmatic knowledge, and arcane sensitivity, represented the best hope the desperate lower wards could muster against the City Watch's inertia. They agreed to meet at the mirewood fringe before the sun reached its zenith the next day, hoping to follow the faint, fading trail of childhood laughter before the summer heat baked away the last tangible traces of the lost. Beric checked the heavy strap of his satchel, ensuring his carefully forged lockpicks and measuring tools were secure. Anya tucked a few hard biscuits into her cloak. The weight of expectation, heavier than any metal ingot, settled upon their shoulders as the last rays of the summer sun, the sun of peak agriculture and vibrant growth, began to dip below the horizon, casting long, crooked shadows that seemed to mimic the very trees they were about to face. Dawn in the mirewood fringe was not a glorious spectacle of golden light, but a slow, grudging seep of pale gray through the suffocating humidity. The meadow month sun, though capable of ripening cornfields, struggled to penetrate the low-hanging mist that clung tenaciously to the stagnant pools where New Seagate's sewage subtly mingled with the swamp's natural brine. It was the 3rd day of their organized search, following the initial unsettling reports. Beric, utilizing his craftsman's eye for pattern, had taken the lead after tracing the unnaturally straight path the children seemed to have taken toward the water. He moved with painstaking precision, testing each submerged log and patch of slippery moss before committing his weight. His apprenticeship in military science gave him a measured tread, far more effective than brute force in this treacherous landscape. He carried not a sword, but a reinforced iron-shod staff, useful for levering debris or bracing against unexpected sinkholes. "Steady," he murmured to Anya, whose city-softened boots were already slick with dark mud. The first 2 days had been spent methodically mapping the periphery. They found Finian's site, the area of the perfectly spiraled reeds. The subsonic thrumming was palpable here, a deep resonance that vibrated in the chest cavity more than the ear. Lyra, placing her slender hands on the slick, pale bark of a weeping cypress, closed her eyes. The effort visibly strained her, the sap's energy was cloying and unnatural, almost like solidified arcane sludge. "It is a lure," she breathed, pulling back her hands as if burned. A slow, sustained resonance designed to soothe, to call something without alarming it. like a lullaby played through stone. She spent the morning weaving complex, counter-frequency wards using woven willow bark and carefully applied essences she'd distilled from rare, high-altitude mountain herbs she always carried, hoping to dampen the pull. Anya, though unnerved, found her footing in small acts of care. She tended to their blistered feet during the brief rest stops, mixing soothing poultices from gathered marsh mint, a common, though less potent, relative of the true Mirewood flora, and water purified by Sarah's careful alchemical filtering apparatus. Their meals were simple: hard, dry bread, salted meat, and brackish water made palatable by Sarah's knowledge of neutralizing agents. "We must maintain our strength," Sarah insisted firmly during their second night's meager supper beside a damp fire that stubbornly refused to blaze high. "The air here drains energy faster than the summer fields demand it. If we grow weak, we cannot perceive the subtle dangers." As they pushed deeper on the third day, the landscape shifted. The usual scuttling noise of marsh life faded, replaced by an unnerving quiet, broken only by the slow, rhythmic drip, drip, drip asterisk of the silvery sap. Beric, focused intensely on the ground, finally located Alara's ribbon, not decayed, but strangely preserved, tied to a branch low over a pool. It was too perfect. He knelt, examining the knot. It wasn't a simple hitch, it was a complex, almost decorative binding, a knot of artistry, not panic. "Someone placed this here," he stated, his voice low, the craftsman recognizing deliberate placement over accidental loss. "This isn't random wilderness behavior. This is execution." The realization stiffened their resolve. The children were not lost, they were being tended to by something methodical. The fourth day brought them into the deep Mirewood proper, the area where the trees grew so close that the overhead canopy filtered the strong meadow sunlight into sickly green shafts. The oppressive summer heat intensified the swamp's natural miasma, making every breath thick and heavy. Lyra, utilizing her ranger skills, scouted ahead, moving silently through the undergrowth, relying on the subtle shifts in air pressure and the almost invisible, disturbed paths left by the strange figures the locals feared. She marked their passage with faint, magically infused chalk dust that only shimmered under the light of the twin moons, a precaution against attracting unwanted attention from anything that might be actively guarding the forest's secrets. Beric and Sarah worked in tandem, relying on their respective disciplines to move forward. Beric, the mechanician, used thin metal probes, crafted for testing the integrity of clockwork mechanisms, to tap the ground ahead, listening for the telltale hollow sounds of deep, hidden pockets of water or unstable silt, a practical application of his meticulous nature. Sarah, the journeyman herbalist, was busy cataloging the increasingly alien flora. The usual hardy swamp weeds gave way to luminous, pale fungi and grasses that seemed to pulse faintly. She recognized none of them, yet they possessed a disturbing similarity to deep-sea bioluminescence, adapted for the dark, wet undergrowth. "These plants thrive on low magical resonance, Beric," she whispered during a brief halt to clean the clinging muck from the gear. "They absorb ambient energy, which means whatever is drawing the children is also feeding this growth." Anya, surprisingly, found herself becoming the group's anchor to human empathy. She noticed the subtle despair creeping into their movements, the grinding fatigue of fighting the oppressive atmosphere. During their midday rest, sheltered beneath the broad, drooping leaves of an unfamiliar mangrove, she took out the remaining biscuits and managed to boil a small amount of water over a carefully shielded, smokeless ember. She insisted everyone eat slowly. "We are not just hunting shadows," she told them quietly, handing Lyra a cup of faintly flavored willow bark tea, a calming draught. "We are bringing home the village's heartbeats. We must move with purpose, not haste. Panic leads to errors in craft and judgment." Her simple acts of sustaining care reminded Beric why the city's common folk were worth saving, not just the gilded merchants. Late that afternoon, guided by a particularly strong, sweet scent Lyra identified as highly concentrated marsh incense, they reached the confluence of two slow-moving rivulets, the location rumored to contain the Serpent's Coil tributary. They found it, a stagnant, oily pool, indeed deeper than the surrounding water. But it was not the location of the children. Instead, half submerged in the black mud at the edge was the silt-stained relic. It was a length of petrified wood, cold to the touch, carved with glyphs that seemed to writhe like eels when Beric held it up to the sparse light. It pulsed with a weak, rhythmic heat. Lyra recognized the pattern. "This is not a lure, it's a key. It resonates with the barrier, opening a path only temporarily. We have wasted time following the effect asterisk of the path, not the path itself. We must find where it leads from." The discovery of the silt-stained relic spurred them onward, confirming Lyra's theory that the Mirewood was merely the staging ground, not the final destination. Using the relic's faint residual warmth as a magical compass, Lyra directed their course back towards the edge of the swamp, closer to the looming, pale stone of New Seagate's western bastion, a structure that suddenly seemed less like a defense and more like a cage. The journey over the next 2 days was fraught with tension, the proximity to civilization ironically making them feel more exposed to the swamp's unseen defenders. On the morning of the 6th day, guided by the increasingly frantic thrumming amplified by the relic, they found the mirror pool. It was a perfect circle of absolute clarity, fed by a hidden spring beneath the bedrock, an anomaly of nature in the suffocating muck. The transition from the brackish, chaotic swamp to this singular point of order was jarring. As Beric cautiously approached, testing the ground's stability with professional skepticism, Lyra gasped. The pool did not reflect the surrounding reeds, it reflected the children. They were visible, silent, standing in a vast, echoing space that smelled overwhelmingly of ozone and metallic sweetness, a space entirely removed from the swamp. They weren't struggling, they were weaving something slowly with tall, translucent figures whose movements were utterly fluid, inhumanely elegant, like reeds in a deep current. They are being tutored, Lyra whispered, her voice tight with disbelief. Or perhaps repatterned. It was here they confronted the immediate threat, Captain Valerius. Emerging from the dense reeds behind them, flanked by 4 heavily armed, grim-faced city watchmen, men whose uniforms looked freshly pressed despite the swamp, Valerius sneered. I thought this rabble would eventually find something useful to stir up. You've saved me the trouble of sweeping the fringe clean myself, artisans. His demeanor confirmed their earlier suspicions, he was not a simple functionary but a willing accomplice. Beric, thinking like a weaponsmith assessing an opponent's weaknesses, noticed the watchman's formation was too rigid for a true swamp skirmish. They were trained for the cobblestones, not the muck. You let them go, Beric accused, his meticulous patience finally snapping, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. For coin to keep your pretty little towers paid for. Valerius merely laughed, drawing a heavy, silver-inlaid cutlass. Sacrifices for progress, Harpswell. The cult requires certain reagents. The Mirewood holds the gateway, and we hold the perimeter. Now, drop the relics and the shiny elf, and perhaps I'll let you drown quietly. Combat erupted. Lyra reacted instantly, channeling the ambient, albeit distorted, energy of the swamp. She didn't conjure fire, instead, she focused on the environment itself, summoning tendrils of thick, clinging mud and grasping reeds to ensnare the watchmen's legs, forcing them into the unstable footing Beric had been mapping. Sarah and Anya, though non-combatants, worked fiercely. Sarah began crushing potent, foul-smelling herbs from her pouch, throwing the dust at the watchmen's faces to obscure their vision and disrupt their breathing in the heavy air, while Anya, drawing on the quiet strength of community spirit, hurled heavy stones she'd collected near the pool's edge with surprising force, distracting Valerius's focus from Lyra's intricate binding spells. The fight was a messy clash between organized, if misplaced, military force and the dedicated, desperate ingenuity of the city's overlooked backbone. Beric, leveraging his staff, used his knowledge of leverage to trip one watchman into a shallow sinkhole, shouting technical directives, lower center of gravity, Valerius. Poor counterweight distribution. This tactical chaos bought Lyra the critical seconds needed to channel the mirror pool's energy, not to enter, but to momentarily destabilize the gateway asterisk itself. The clash with Captain Valerius and his men was brutal, a messy illustration of specialized skill overcoming blunt authority. Lyra, realizing she could not fight the whole unit while keeping the gateway stable, poured nearly all her reserve energy into the mirror pool. The water erupted, not with a wave, but with a blinding, silent flash of pale light that resonated with the Mirewood's thrumming energy, overloading the conduit the silt-stained relic represented. Valerius screamed, clutching his eyes as the feedback hit him, and his remaining men stumbled back, their rigid formation shattered by the unexpected arcane backlash. Beric, seeing the momentary reprieve, lunged, using his iron-shod staff not as a weapon, but as a perfectly balanced lever to strike the relic from Lyra's grasp. The moment the artifact left the immediate vicinity of the pool, the vision of the children snapped away, the air pressure normalizing with an audible pop asterisk, leaving behind only the stagnant, humid silence of the Mirewood. The watchmen, disoriented and their commander temporarily blinded and incapacitated, broke ranks. They were soldiers of the city, not swamp hermits. The raw, untamed power of the exposed Mirewood nexus was too much. They retreated, dragging Valerius with them, leaving behind their pride and a few discarded weapons. The children were gone from sight, but the immediate, active pull had ceased. We bought time, not freedom, Lyra panted, leaning heavily on Beric, her elven composure momentarily stripped away by the exhaustion. They spent the rest of the day securing the mirror pool area. Beric, the dedicated craftsman, understood that a flawed mechanism needed to be taken apart. Using his tools, he meticulously dismantled the silt-stained relic, crushing the petrified wood until it was mere coarse dust, and scattering the cold, ancient bronze fragments into the deepest, most stagnant water he could find, ensuring no one could easily reassemble the key. Anya and Sarah, meanwhile, found a faint, almost imperceptible trail leading away from the pool, not back toward the city, but deeper into the swamp, a path taken by the translucent figures, indicating a secondary, permanent locus of activity away from the boundary. They knew the immediate danger was past, but the root cause remained. As the meadow-month sun finally set, painting the brackish water in tones of bruised purple and fading orange, a familiar, yet tainted sunset, they established a temporary camp far from the nexus. The next day, they would return to New Seagate, not with the children, but with the damning evidence of Valerius's betrayal and the knowledge that the Meyerwood's influence extended into the city's very authority. Beric looked at his muddy hands accustomed to shaping silver and steel, now stained with swamp muck. He had not created art, but he had undone a dangerous machine, a necessary deconstruction. For the children, the fight was not over, but for now, the children of the Saltmarsh had a champion, one who understood that true artistry often meant tearing down what was built incorrectly. They rested, knowing that the season of vibrant growth would soon demand they face whatever ancient horror had taken root beneath the port city's prosperous facade.